I've been looking for an excuse to talk about the Strokes for quite a while now, and considering they're probably not going to be releasing any new music anytime soon, and I don't really have enough time at the moment to review every single one of their albums, I thought for now I'd just jump in and look at one of their albums. Since we only seem to celebrate anniversaries that are a multiple of 5 and Room on Fire doesn't really give me a lot to talk about, I thought instead I'd look at the band's most controversial and polarizing album, Comedown Machine. Comedown Machine came out in a very weird time for the band. They just recently ended their hiatus and released their 4th album, Angles, which received very mixed reviews and was criticised for its heavy use of synthesizers, and pretty much the whole band were off doing their own solo stuff and other projects instead. And Julian Casablancas even came out and essentially acknowledged the fact that the band were only still going because they wanted the money and they weren't actually enjoying playing their songs. They had one more album they needed to make to fulfill their contract with RCA, so they quickly and quietly made their 5th album, Comedown Machine. An album that was released with no interviews leading up to it, no tours, and only one official single. It was commercially somewhat successful, although to date is their least successful album, and reception from fans and critics alike was pretty mixed to say the least. When I first heard the album, to be honest, I completely hated it. Apart from Room on Fire, there wasn't really a single Strokes album that I didn't absolutely adore. So when I came to this one and found out how just all over the place it was, I was really disappointed. But I have given it quite a few listens since then, and I'm much kinder towards it, although I do still think it's a heavily flawed album. The album in some ways sounds like they've basically taken their 4 albums before and just thrown them into a blender and created this weird, like, Frankenstein's monster of an album that has all these little bits that work and all these little bits that are familiar with the Strokes, but when they're all brought together, just it doesn't really feel right. They're basically trying to make this album that's almost like a recap of their previous 4 albums and has all those different styles and different songs, but it just doesn't really work together. There are so many of those classic, fast, hard-hitting garage punk songs, like songs like All the Time and 50/50 are definitely like these. And then there are also some more new wave and synth pop inspired songs like Tap Out and the title track, and also the song Chances. And although many, if not pretty much all the songs on this album are very good, together they just kind of sound really disjointed. The album opens with one of its highlights, Tap Out, a very funky, almost R&B sounding song. Julian Casablancas' vocals on the song are really great, with his heavy use of falsetto contrasting perfectly with his calm and more subdued low vocals. And the guitar work on this track is especially really great. I love the really punchy palm muted riffs in the verse, which just melts perfectly into the rhythm section and creates this really driving and bouncy instrumentation. There's also this really great guitar solo later on, which is easily one of the best guitar moments on the entire album. It's then followed by All the Time, which sounds like something that could have just been an outtake of their first couple albums. It has that distinctive, crunchy yet defined guitar tone that is in pretty much everything from the first 2 albums. I really enjoy the chorus, and that really fuzzy hammer-on / pull-off filled guitar solo is just incredible. But the verses and the main riff of the song don't really work that well. Those parts of the song kind of feel like the band are trying to recreate their classic sound, but they don't really want to do it, and I feel like that's something that sums up a lot of the tracks on this album really well. The next song, One Way Trigger, is a much better song that I feel blends the 2 sounds of the album together really perfectly. It's an incredibly energetic, raw, new wave inspired song with this bright yet slightly aggressive lead synth part, which plays perfectly with Casablancas' heavy use of falsetto. Although falsetto isn't one of his strongest vocal traits, highlights. It works really well on this song and a lot of the songs on the album because of the emotion that seems to be in his voice. He said that the song was the first song that he wrote after a year-long break after coming back from rehab, and I feel like his vocals have this really great urgency in them. Welcome to Japan is definitely another highlight for me. It has this really great funky groove, and I love the use of the band's signature guitar interplay, which for the most part is very lacking on a lot of the songs on this album and even their last album as well. I love the lyrics of the song as well, just because of how sarcastic, comedic, and tongue-in-cheek they are. The lyric, "What kind of arsehole drives a Lotus?" is probably one of my favourite lyrics on the entire album. After this, we get 80s Comedown Machine, which is a much slower and more atmospheric song. It has this electronic, almost 16-bit sounding drum loop, which I think sounds really cool, and it blends perfectly with the use of Mellotron on this song. But compared to some of the band's other slow jams, even some of the ones later on this album, the song doesn't really hold much weight, and I don't know, it doesn't really feel like a necessary part of the album at all. The heavy use of Mellotron reminds me a lot of the song Ask Me Anything from their third album, which was a similarly slow Mellotron-led song that I thought worked way better. And because of that song, every time I hear this, I think it could have just been done a whole lot better, but the song just kind of ends up feeling like a weird interlude and one that goes on way too long. It's the longest song on the album, with it clocking in at just under 5 minutes, and I cannot say that it justifies its length at all. It then leads into the really aggressive, relentless 50-50, which is a fucking jam. It's the Strokes doing Is This It era music, which actually feels like something that could have been released at that time and would have fit comfortably with those other songs. I love Casablancas' heavily distorted vocals mixed in with the incredibly memorable guitar riffs. All of these things make it one of the standout tracks on the album. We then get Slow Animals, which is easily one of the most forgettable songs. Although the restrained vocals sound quite pretty throughout, the melodies, the hook and the guitar riffs are nothing really special. It's followed by Partners in Crime, which has an incredible opening guitar riff, but it doesn't really work with the rest of the song. The opening riff is basically a completely different style to the rest of the song, and it feels really out of place. The rest of the song is a very bouncy, almost glam rock sounding song, which is catchy and fun, although far from a standout again. However, after this we get my favourite track on the album, Chances, which is a really beautiful synth pop ballad about moving on from a bad relationship. The synthesizers are all luscious and crisp, and Casablancas' falsetto seems to be right at the limit of his vocal range, and it just sounds beautiful. The next song, Happy Ending, is another one, although isn't terrible, it's far from a standout and isn't really that memorable. I like the verses, but that's really about it. And then we have the final song on the album, Call It Fate, Call It Karma, which is meant to be this weird old style jazzy song. It's basically elevator music, and it's as boring and uninteresting as you'd expect it to be. The instrumentation with the falsetto doesn't work at all because Casablancas' falsetto isn't very good to begin with. What makes it work on those other songs is the emotion behind it and kind of the imperfection of the rest of the instrumentation as well. But on this, where everything is meant to sound so clean and crisp and his vocals aren't supposed to be that emotional, it really doesn't work. The song sounds in a lot of ways like a joke song, but it's one that's played with complete sincerity. It's seriously fucking awful, one of the worst songs they've ever done. Comedown Machine is an 11-song album, which compared to a lot of albums is actually quite short, and there's nothing wrong with a short album like this if not all the songs are really damn good. Is This It, for example, was also only 11 songs long, but every single song on that album was really great. However, this album is just kind of all over the place. Although it has its real standout highlights, there are a lot of moments that just feel like filler at best. Not to mention, because there's never really a clear direction, the album kind of feels muddled and confused. It literally just feels like they were making 2 different albums and then they basically just spliced it all together, so it just kind of is a very mixed bag. There's nothing wrong with being diverse and having a lot of different sounds on your album, but you have to make them kind of fit together somehow. This is something that I thought they did really well on their last album. They actually kind of blended in that classic garage rock sort of style with a more new wave and synth pop inspired sound. And because the songwriting was so good and because there were so many different styles on that album, it felt a lot better and actually fit together well. Whereas on this one, it seems like just two different styles that they've just kind of tried to throw at each other, and it doesn't work. But to be fair, at the same time, there are a lot of really fantastic songs on the album, which I think are among some of my favourite Strokes songs of all time. Songs like Tap Out, Welcome to Japan, 50/50 and Chances are among my favourite songs they've ever done. Which is why I'm so mixed towards this album, and I think a lot of other people are as well. If you like the band and want to listen to everything they've ever done, then 100% it's worth giving it a listen. But otherwise, if you're just a casual fan, I'd say just listen to those 4 songs that I personally really loved and just skip the rest, because they're not really that important and they don't add a lot to the band's discography. So I'm gonna give Comedown Machine by The Strokes a 7 out of 10. Hi guys, thanks for watching this little throwback sort of review. I want to do a few more videos like this, but I probably won't be doing a lot of them towards the end of the year, because now's the point where I need to start working on my year-end lists, and there's going to be a lot of work that goes into especially the worst songs one, because there's not really been many songs I really hate, so I have to do a lot of research and find some songs. Did you like this album or did you hate this album? If you've heard it, let me know in the comment section below, and I will see you next time.